Game turn 2 just about to start. Sort of started already. Wanted to take you through game turn 1 a little bit. It's pretty dark. I'm not sure what's going on with my camera. But let's see how it looks, and if it's horrible in the edit, I'll deal with it. We set up our breaches there, and there to break through the walls. I kept all the doors open, sent the first unit. One unit made it into the space. These ones made it over to here. I was going to send them up the way. Sorry about the big bright thing in the shot there. And these ones were going to check out this hive area. In the sequence of turns, the first turn is the Xenon command phase, and that includes the mind control segment and the queen activation segment, neither of which applied right at the beginning of the game. There was no queens active or on the board, and there was no master queens on the board. There was no Xenon queens on the board, so there was none close enough to our Terran forces to even try to mind control them. So we skipped that phase and we went right into the Terran movement and combat phase, the first part of which is Terran movement and ranged combat segment. This unit here and this unit here started way up the board there. There was no chance of, when my forces came onto the board, that they could deal with any sort of ranged combat, because the ranged combat is 2 spaces away. So that couldn't happen. So everybody just moved. As soon as we moved in here, it activated this room, which was a pretty, going through the distribution, it's a fantastic way of dealing with it. So the first thing that happens is one unit is picked from Mix A. Mix A has the, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Mix A has the queen and the queens and master queen in it. And then you determine where they're going to go, which is the queen placement table. You roll 2 dice, you find the number and cross-reference it, and that's the space that it lands on. So the queen is under here. The queen is there, that 4-1, in room 12. So that's where she was placed. The next thing you do is the player then rolls 2 dice using the nest population table, which is right here, to determine the number of units selected from Mix D. I picked a 2, so it was a 5 to a 6. 2 units came, the same thing happens. There's the nest deployment table where you put each individual units. 1 unit automatically goes with the queen, which is that unit stacked right there. The second one gets distributed on another spot. I believe that was on space 13. Yeah, that would be correct. Space 13 was where this guy was initially deployed. The final chit pull is from Mix D in addition. Mix C. So from the C cup, which is there, you deploy one of those face down, similar way. After all groups are deployed, 1 unit from Mix C is selected and deployed face down using the same procedure, which is you take 1 unit, you go to the nest deployment table, and you deploy it that way, face down. So we don't know what that one is right now. Great way to do it. Loved it. Sorry, I should go over. This is from C, the Xenon movement and combat phase. No, that's not actually, sorry, that's still from the movement because we moved into the Hive. So that happened again. There was nobody within range. The nearest was 3 spaces away, which is 1 too many. The Terran melee combat section, which is if you're occupying the same hex or the same space as an enemy force you fight. That wasn't the case, so again we ignored that and then moved on to the Xenon movement and combat phase. Xenon movement and rage combat segment. Xenon controlled units may move and engage in other game activities. So this was a chance to try out the Xenon action chart, which again is a pretty great way to kind of randomize. First thing you do is you roll 1 die. If it's a 1 or a 2, it tells you the priorities. A 4 or 5, the priorities are different. On a 5 or 6, the priorities are different yet. I rolled a 2, I believe, so my priorities was going just A through A through H is what I mean to say. A through H. And basically what you're looking for is which of these in that order pertains to your units individually, basically. If there's a couple of choices that pertain to your units, it suggests that you roll a die to select which one. I decided not to do that because I figure if they're giving you a priority, if they're giving you these choices in like a prioritized order, I figure the first one that you come across in that order will be the one that you do, regardless of if there's doubles of them, if there's a couple of options rather. So engage a darter in ranged combat through an open breach. Didn't happen. None were close enough. Fire in ranged combat at the nearest enemy unit. And then enter the enemy's box. Wasn't the case. There was, again, everybody was out of range. Move towards and into, if possible, the nearest enemy occupied box, if there is any within 10 movement points distance. That's something that occurred here. So this guy was able to move into this box. This guy was able to move into what was a Terran player's box at D10. This one was flipped over at the time. This was our double unit, so you can tell what happened. This guy moved towards them, and this guy moved towards the units. It didn't apply to these 3 up here, which were, I think one was over here, one was down here, I think, and I think one was over there, possibly, somewhere in there. If I remember correctly, maybe space 15. The one that applied to them was move towards nearest friendly hostage, didn't apply. Move towards nearest friendly queen or master queen if one was in with 10 spaces, didn't apply. Move towards nearest friendly unit if any are within 10 movement points distance. So that's what happened with these 3. They just kind of moved towards each other. And now we're in this formation. Thinking about it, I didn't actually move that 3-1-3 there. I suppose he should have. Well, he is with the queen already, so it was moved towards the queen. He's already there, so maybe that's why I didn't move that one. Either way, so that's how the Xenon forces were kind of dealt with and kind of randomized their movements. Very effective, I think. I mean, these guys moved into a formation which would make sense to me. These 2 units attacked or moved to a space to be able to attack. This guy is going to head them off. As they enter the room, he'll be behind them, so I think that's a pretty solid move. So there you go. That led us to the Xenon melee combat segment. So how does the combat segment work? Let's reverse this one and start from the top. The number on the left, the 8, is the attack. This 4 up at the top is for that ranged combat. That's its ranged combat strength. This one is its melee combat strength, so when they're sharing a box together. 8 His was 7. Let me just make sure that from what I remember, it was subtracting 7 from the 8 from his attack, so subtracting the kind of target's attack strength from the attacker's strength. Units may melee attack singly or together with other friendly units. The owning player chooses a single target unit for each unit or group of units that is going to participate in a given melee attack, subtracting the target's melee combat strength from the totaled melee combat strength of the attacking units to determine the combat modifier. So the combat modifier in this case was 1, because 7 subtracted from 8 left 1. You roll 2 dice, and then you refer to the melee combat results table. So you're adding that 1 to the dice. I believe I rolled a 7. I think I rolled a 6, adding 1 was a 7. So the effect on target is the number 1, which means one affected individual is eliminated, owning player's choice. So in this case, there was only 1 unit in there, so it was eliminated. It's gone. In this case, there was 2 in there, so it just for those units, they get flipped over to their single side. And if we refer to the chart again, underneath is the effect on attacking units, and in this case there's 0 effect. So nothing happens to the attacking units. We perished, unfortunately. So right out of the gate, a couple of deaths and a couple more units eliminated during the first turn. Let's refer back to the turn table here. So Xenon melee combat segment done. Hive escape phase, evacuation segment, outer defense segment, and hyperdrive segment. None of those applied to us. We're not leaving. We haven't rescued any hostages, so there's no need for laser fire, any sort of thing, or hyperdrive segment, because we're not at that turn yet. And then the last step is the gain turn indication phase, which is where I was at. I'm moving the game turn token 1 spot. And I'd started kind of on game turn 2 because we could talk about the mind control segment and the queen activation segment. So it says in the rules, a queen is activated as soon as an enemy unit enters the area that they're in. So originally that unit that was there activated the queen. The queen has to be within 3 spaces of a unit to be able to try to take over their minds, and in this case it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away, so nothing would happen there. That's the only queen that's on the board under that 313, I should say. That the 4-1 being the queen there. So it didn't apply to us on this turn, and that's what I spent a bit of time reading about because I couldn't remember the range. I thought it was a little more than that. So then it gets us back into our Terran movement and ranged combat segment again. As far as any movement goes, I don't think I will be moving these units. They're in good position for a ranged combat, and since they're doubled up, I'd like to take care of this guy before we enter this area and activate whatever's going to be in there. Similar thoughts for this one. These two are both in great position to gang up on him. I'll have to read about that though, because if they're sharing the hex, can they still participate in the melee, or do they just stick to the ranged combat? Or sorry, can they participate in the ranged combat? Can they only participate in the melee combat since they're in the same hex? Or square, sorry, or space. And same with these units, I don't think are going to move because they'd like to take care of this chappie right there too. So I think as far as movement goes, there's going to be nothing, so we'll deal with some ranged combat. So I'll finish game turn 2 and we'll come back and have a look at what happened. Let's just have a quick talk about this since I read. So with the ranged combat, it incapacitates the enemy. I don't want to do that. I want to kill these people. I want to get rid of them. I don't want to have any chance of them becoming conscious again, I guess, and still coming to mess with us. So for all the units, I just expended some movement points to get to the box. So those two are now going to gang up on him. These two moved into his space, and I moved these 2, 4, 5 units basically into this Xenon player's hex or space. And that's pretty much going to take care of that. There was nobody else for me to move. These are the only forces that I have on the board, unfortunately. All of a sudden it's really feeling like this game turn 12 is going to come pretty quick. So I think I'm almost tempted to just leave that undiscovered, to send these units up to the laser pod area and start destroying some engine rooms so we can advance that jump phase. I haven't quite decided what, but either way, the most immediate problem that we have is attacking these units. So I'll do that in our next portion here. The Terran movement and combat phase, so we'll get right into the Terran melee combat segment. Let's do it then. I'll be right back and tell you how it went. So predictably, it didn't go so well for the Xenon forces. Severely outmatched. So there's the casualties over here. Even though I'm playing the rescuing the hostages scenario, I'm just going to keep track of also what's been killed off throughout the game. Especially in a section like this that was 7 plus 7 is 14, plus 4 is 18, minus I think it was a 3. So it's 15 modifier to the die roll. 13 or more is the max, and it's elimination, so there you go, no need to really roll. This one was a bit of a different situation because it was 7, so 8 subtracted from the 7 is like a -1. I left it there an 11, which even at a 10, if I subtracted that 1, is still the 7 to 10, or 7 to 12 rather, which is the effect on the target is a 1, so he was destroyed as well. Yeah. So that's that. The other benefit of, I guess, doing the ranged combat and incapacitating them is you can do it in the middle of your movement. So you expend 2 of movement points to do it, and then you can continue on moving. So I guess part of that incapacitating is if maybe it's a little more risky of a maneuver that you're going to be able to kill them, you incapacitate them, so at least when it comes to their turn where they can do a ranged combat on you, they're unable to because they're incapacitated. So I guess that's the benefit there. And then I guess you can also move as well, continue your movement. Now if you're on the same space as an enemy unit, you have to do a die roll to see if you can disengage from the combat. So you can't kind of go in, and I think that applies to when they're incapacitated. You can't go into the space, incapacitate them, and then move out of the space. As far as I know, I'd have to read on that, but I don't think that you can. So here's where we stand now, game turn 2, and nothing else has really been explored. Just had to take care of xenon units, unfortunately. My battery is dying here, so this is probably a good chance to upload these videos. I'm going to do some reading about like the armory room, command room, hatchery, gravity control, etc. See what else I want to do. Maybe well, the way the doorways are set up, I kind of have to go through the queen and this worker, I think it is, or soldier, I'm not sure, to get to that undiscovered chit. Because in that pile, no, in mix C is not the ambassador and his daughter. So maybe it's a good chance for me to just leave the room, since we know that the hostages aren't in here. I shouldn't maybe waste any more time and possibly getting into fights and getting more guys destroyed. So maybe that's the strategy. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's it, and I'll be back. Okay, well, I'm back for another additional, instead of uploading this. I just finished game turn 3, entering game turn 4. It really goes fast, I've got to say. It goes fast. That game turn 12 is not far away at all. So what happened? Well, I moved my defeated units into this spot here instead. Another one of my guys got killed. They just are just completely surrounding us. According to, I had a different xenon action chart order, which was E, F, G, A, C, D, B, I, H. So E was moved towards hostages, none. F was moved towards friendly queen or master queen, which is what was happening here. On my Terran movement phase, we entered this particular hive and it got populated with quite a few people. 2 were put there, 2 were put in command, and 1 upside down there. And then due to the move towards a friendly queen, that's why these units have left the command room and moved towards them here. Again, there's a number of choices in this one for these units since we're all in close proximity. But as I stated at the beginning, I'm going, since they want me to go in a certain order, whichever one affects me first is going to be the one, or affects the Xenon players first is going to be the one that I go with each time. So that's why that happened. This one did have a kind of an option. He was 1, 2, 3, 4. He was on space 67. He could have gone either way. I chose to go this way. I didn't roll a die or anything. It wasn't random. If I would have went this way, it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, which would have landed on space 36. I want to give my guys a little bit of a break here. I mean, I guess I could have made it more difficult and went right on top of them and then fought them, but and then these units just completely stacked onto each other, so that's a space with 3 Xenon forces on it right there that will come into play once we get to try to make our way to the engine rooms here. The ending, there was nothing because nobody was sharing a space, so there was no battles. I have a feeling what's going to happen next time is he's going to be able to attack through this open door one of our darters, and we'll see if one of our darters gets destroyed since he's well within the range there. It's quite overpowered. I believe I'm playing it correctly. I'm not really sure what else I can do. I guess it's a matter of putting more forces into the ships, but because a ship and an engineer costs 8, that leaves less room to purchase more units. I thought we could purchase units throughout the game as well too, but it's not come up anywhere. it's not one of the options. I should have a read again just to clarify, just to make 100% sure. But I don't see a way that they could get on board. It's not something that resets at the beginning of each game turn. That's the beginning of the game from what I understand, unless I read that wrong. But I can't imagine that you get 70 points to just buy new units every single time and just keep flooding the hive. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Either way, it's a difficult game. I really enjoy it, but it's really difficult. This is heavily stacked against the Terran forces. And as I say, I'm pretty sure I'm playing it right. I'm not missing out on anything. But nonetheless, we'll keep powering through. I think our next choice is just to get the hell out of this room and continue to the next one to see if we can find these hostages and try desperately to save them and try to get back to one of our ships and get the hell out of here. I don't know if I'm going to even make it up to the engine room. I have a feeling I should just focus, since I'm getting annihilated, just focus on finding these hostages. Now, if they don't appear in my random chit pulls in any of these rooms that are empty, I'm going to have to make my way there, because that means that they will appear. They will appear on this bridge and laser pod room here. Either way, there we have it.